He's gonna have to fight! Bang! Pressure's coming! Dumped! Hogtied! When you've given everything, what will the record books say about you, Matthew?
Hey, welcome back for Season 2, Episode 28 of White Noise Sports with Tanner White. Last week, NFL quarterbacks went on a generational injury streak, and a lot of backup quarterbacks hung in there, even winning some games. Then Justin Verlander made it clear he wants to pitch again next year at 43 years old, and the Dodgers mold the idea of using Shohei Ohtani as a reliever in the postseason. And this week, let's kick off with what I'm going to call, painfully, the anatomy of a late season collapse. Womp womp, a 15.5 game lead is gone. The Detroit Tigers have done the unthinkable, and the Cleveland Guardians are playing unbelievable. It all tastes so particularly sour coming out of my mouth, but let's start with Tuesday night's game this week to kind of piece together how this is even possible. The scene from Tuesday, 6th inning, 2-0 Tigers lead, Tarik Skubal on the mound versus Cleveland in a 3-game set that allows the winner to determine their own fate in the final weekend of the year. The sequence that would lead to Skubal giving up the lead and the Tigers giving up their control of the division was something akin to, if you recall, the Yankees' hilarious inning from Game 5 of the World Series last year with the Dodgers. The baseball essentially never leaves the infield, and still the cacophony of errors makes the playoff picture even muddier. Here's what happened. First, known Tiger killer Steven Kwan, the Guardians outfielder, pushes a bunt right by the mound. Kwan's always been known to get out of the box pretty quickly, and he turns it into a base hit. Happens, good play. Next batter up for Cleveland is Angel Martinez, the center fielder. He also bunts, but this time it's meant to be a sacrifice. At this point, when Skubal had gone 5 shutout with 1 walk and 3 hits, they thought, okay, we have to get him for 1 right now or we never will. Then the most baffling decision of the inning was Skubal coming off the mound to field the bunt and trying to long snap it between his legs to first base. It goes predictably a good couple of feet over the head of the first baseman and into foul territory in right field. The official scoring is a sac bunt, E1, advancing both runners by 2 bases. No one out, second and third. Not a great spot. Jose Ramirez, one of the greatest Tiger killers in baseball history, hits a slow chop to third that goes for 1 more infield hit, and the first run of the inning comes in, albeit unearned to Skubal because of his own error. So it looked bad at that point. First and third, a run in, nobody out. David Fry is the next batter for Cleveland. It's a 99-mile-an-hour four-seam that, try as I might, I still can't see quite well enough on the replay, but it appears to be a foul ball off his bat on a bunt and directly into his face. His nose is bloodied, he's woozy, and Skubal takes off his hat, and he has just this look. He is so sick to his stomach. You've probably never really seen this exact look out of him before. And he's kind of known to plunk guys because he likes to throw inside. Fry has to leave on the cart, and the at-bat is continued by a pinch hitter who inherits a 2-1 count. A wild pitch on a changeup scores a second run in the inning during that at-bat, and now it's a tie game, 2-2. The pinch hitter strikes out looking, not shocking as Skubal did have 8 of them, and he was cranking his fastball as high as about 101. He's so rattled from that Fry injury, though, that he's staring down Jose Ramirez at second base, and Ramirez just wins the mental game, makes him balk. After that, you got an RBI groundout from shortstop Gabriel Arias, and 1 more strikeout. The damage is all done. 3 runs, only 1 earned on such a diverse series of mistakes. It was the first time in MLB history a former Cy Young winner had an error, a wild pitch, and a balk all in the same inning. So the questions that arise: if you can't lean on the best pitcher on the planet with a lead in the middle innings, what can you do? If you can't score a run after the 6th inning against a team missing their suspended best closer in baseball, what do you do? If you're last in the league by a wide margin in stolen bases, steal attempts, and sack bunts, so you really don't have many ways of manufacturing runs, what do you do? If your all-star representatives from the first half have seen their numbers nosedive in the second half, what do you do? And if you have team ownership that isn't willing to spend the money or move the prospects around at the trade deadline to fill in some of those cracks right when they pop up, what do you do? These are all rhetorical questions that aren't going to get answered unless Detroit can now be the ones to come back and finish with a better record than Cleveland. Because they've lost the tiebreaker, that's the reality that they're facing. The other dubious milestones the Tigers hit. They led Cleveland by 10.5 games on September 1st, 9.5 games on September 10th, probably being the craziest of all. They lost the second game of the Cleveland series on Wednesday night, too, to put them down by a game in the Central. They can gain that one game back with the finale on Thursday, being today at time of recording, and their last series of the year is in Boston, who will in all likelihood make the postseason too, it looks like. How Detroit manages their rotation in this final weekend is going to be fascinating because they're not supposed to see the Red Sox ace Garrett Crochet, but they still might have to ask Skubal to go on short rest, whether in game 161 or 162, if they need to win on one of those days to get in. Then you wouldn't be able to get him back in the wild card round for a while? Lot to think about. Long story long, Tuesday night was the Tigers' biggest loss of the season, and they are behind the 8-ball in what could be fairly called the worst collapse in MLB history. To think, this was the team that was forging their own miracle run to the playoffs last year. They were the gritty Tigers. They finished out 31-11 in August and September. They beat a pretty good Astros team in the wild card, and they went all the way to Game 5 with Cleveland in the ALDS. The feeling around the whole state of Michigan is that it's all ancient history. Detroit was the best team in baseball for the first half with a 59-38 record. They lost their last 4 games heading into the All-Star break, so maybe there were cracks in the armor right then. But all of the things that they had going for them were so hard to ignore. Skubal was back to leading the American League in Triple Crown stats most of the way. He only really had competition from Paul Skeens as the best pitcher in baseball. Riley Green was an MVP candidate. Javier Baez had won the starting vote as a center fielder of all positions. Everyone else in their starting rotations was looking like they belonged. Former number 1 pick Casey Mize had just suffered through one bad start with 6 earned runs in 6 innings, but the previous game had lowered his ERA to 2.63 heading into the break. Reese Olson was only 25 years old. He's since turned 26, but his ERA was also under 3 at the break. Their bullpen was considered a team strength, and then the second half hits. The trade deadline passed, and the Tigers didn't add a single bat, let alone one that would make a real impact. They brought in bargain bin pitchers like Chris Paddock and Charlie Morton, who have both thrown to ERAs over 6, and Morton has already been cut. There were a handful of other minor acquisitions, the only one with an impact probably being Rafael Montero in their bullpen. It was one of the all-time cheap outs for a team that should have been AL World Series favorites, and it's caused one of the league's all-time worst collapses. No team since the American and National League first started cooperating in 1903 has ever given up a division lead of 15.5 games or more. Doom and gloom is even tougher and more oppressive when you have to get into it with your hometown team. Can you tell? The funniest part is, I've been focused on the Tigers, and they're not even the only ones caught in a crazy spiral. The New York Mets are also stuck in a freefall, and they're the most notorious spenders, probably not named the Dodgers, of the last 5 years. Juan Soto, of course, signed the $765 million deal this offseason. He was supposed to go play MVP and single-handedly bring in a World Series, I guess. Pete Alonso has 37 home runs, 123 RBIs, and if he could field his position or run the bases, he would be an MVP candidate. Francisco Lindor is one of the great ball player shortstops who's just great at everything there is to do on the field to the tune of 5.4 wins above replacement. So how are the Metropolitans also trying to yank themselves out of the quicksand and avoid their own great collapse? There was a short time, if you'll recall, where the Mets had the best record in baseball. It was a little earlier than Detroit did, but if you look back at June 12th, you'd see they sat at 45-24, and they had won 6 straight. They had a 5.5 game lead over the Phillies in the division, and you could have penciled them in as a playoff team at minimum. I have no idea why it's been so in vogue to get off to a great start and absolutely crater this year, but pretty much every division leader's had it. I just read that every division has had a first-place team blow a lead of at least 5.5 games at some point this season and get caught by a team behind them. This is going to be a season to be studied on that end. Speaking of, back to the Mets case study, I also just learned in a Fox Sports article that the Mets don't have a single win this year when trailing after 8 innings. They are 0-67 in that situation, and the only team in baseball that doesn't have at least 1 win. With the top 3 of their typical lineup looking like an MVP race all of its own, They haven't accidentally ran into one late with somebody on base. They haven't forced a single closer to throw enough pitches and scratched a few across somehow. Look, Juan Soto himself has been incredible. So much so that it feels sort of impossible to blame him for anything that's gone wrong with this team. He's the leading base stealer in the entire major leagues in the second half. Again, base stealer, Juan Soto. Just what? Even though your eyes can tell you just as clearly as the numbers can that his speed is well below average. He has a career-high 42 home runs, he's over 100 RBI, over 120 walks again. Basically, he is doing Barry Bonds numbers. Hilariously, the Mets are 14th in ninth inning scoring, which is, it's just another one of these stats that you look up and down their season and you're thinking, there's so many areas where the math doesn't add up. They should not be here. And there's their payroll to consider. At least the Tigers are middle of the pack in that regard, and we know that they're infamous non-spenders. The Mets are second, again, only to the Dodgers in payroll for 2025, with over $341 million paid out this year. Of course, Soto is the biggest chunk of that by a lot. He's making over $61 million this year. Lindor and Pete Alonso are, again, near MVP level players, both getting over $30 million. That's totally fair. They have a closer, Edwin Diaz, and a starter, Sean Manaea, who are getting over $20 million. Good, pedigreed players, every one of those, and yet so many other weird things have happened to this team. They've had 3 separate losing streaks of 7 or more games this year. Why is this really good team just not that good? I haven't even figured it out to the degree that I have with Detroit. The Mets have held a playoff spot since April 5th, but they only have the 3rd NL wildcard spot by half a game right now over the Diamondbacks, and the Reds are also chasing them, both of those teams owning season tiebreakers against the Mets. Same boat as Detroit here. They now have to finish with a better record than both of those other teams in order to get in. Their last series of the season is with the Marlins, and they may also have to go all the way down to game 162 to know if they're going to get into the playoffs or not. And like I say, that is the anatomy of an MLB collapse. I promise I will find some positives and I will pull myself out of this dark hole. There are some changes coming to this beautiful, crazy game. The league stares down eventual realignment and expansion. There's ever-increasing arm injuries for starting pitchers, and somehow inexplicably also the threat of 6-inning minimums for said starters. But we do know that one positive change is coming. The league just announced the automated balls and strikes system, ABS, is going to be rolled out for next regular season. It's been in action during spring training, which I touched on at the time. The rules to it are really simple, and I might go so far as to say they could expand the challenge system before the season starts. Each team is going to get 2 challenges per game, which you can keep if you're successful. These can still only come from the batter, pitcher, or catcher, and as I understand it, they're still only applicable to called balls or called strikes. I don't believe it's going to apply to check swings, at least for now, but I also sort of think that those should end up reviewable someday. You have to declare the challenge immediately after the pitch, although it doesn't look like they're going to actually put some sort of a clock on it and say, well, this guy waited 3 seconds instead of 2, so that's strike 3. The league is partnering with Verizon, using their 5G networks to transmit the data from the Hawkeye cameras that have given us ball tracking data for years across tons of different sports. Decent little marketing opportunity on each side. And umpires are objectively, in almost all cases, really, really good at their jobs. Very high accuracy rates across the entire league, whether we want to admit it or not. But there certainly might be 2 calls per team per game where it makes a difference in the final outcome. I love ABS, and the future is now. And on these magical Sundays in the fall and winter, it's time to embrace being glued to the couch watching football. Pretty incredible week 3 of the NFL regular season. Just going to run down a couple of insanities. 3 different teams blocked 4 field goals within about 30 minutes of real time, all in the 1 p.m. Eastern window during week 3. The Eagles had 2 of them, one of which might have just become my favorite blocked kick of all time. The Rams were lined up for a game winner from 44 yards out, trailing by 1 point, and Jordan Davis makes an all-time great D-lineman play. He blocks the field goal himself through the A-gap, recovers it, and gets out the gate for a 61-yard touchdown return with no time. The game was already over the moment that kick was blocked, but you have to take your chance right there. If you're 336-pound Jordan Davis, and you might never have a chance that good to score again. Yes, the more fundamentally sound football play is to go down, especially if you can look up in that end zone and see, okay, the clock is already at 0, but if we're all honest with ourselves, very few would have that kind of self-restraint. Awesome play. The Lions-Ravens game Monday night felt like an instant classic, and Derrick Henry has inexplicably fumbled in 3 straight to start the year. 2 of them have, for the most part, cost Baltimore football games, and they're now 1-2. David Montgomery, the Lions' presumed short yardage grinder kind of back, now has the longest rush in the league through the first 3 weeks with a 72-yarder in the third quarter. Naturally, his longest run all last year in 14 games was 21 yards. Stats are fun. The Giants benched Russell Wilson for Jaxson Dart only 3 games in, even after Russ had a 450-yard 3-touchdown game in Week 2 and had still shown that he had some juice in his legs. It's the first non-injury-related quarterback domino to fall this year. Other quarterbacks on 0-3 teams who might be next. There's always Tua turn the ball over, but he looks much more likely to be traded than to be benched, especially if Mike McDaniel is the first head coach to get fired this year. That looks increasingly likely every week. I hate to say that the Texans' C.J. Stroud is on the list of quarterbacks who are in trouble, but you really can't go under 200 yards a game. You can't start 0-3, losing to the Jaguars, and only have 2 touchdowns to 3 interceptions in 3 games. If he were to get a little 1-week reset, I bet it would do him some good. And technically the one other quarterback that should be in danger, because of purely performance, is the Titans' number 1 overall pick this year, Cam Ward. He's second to last among qualified quarterbacks in QBR, and to my surprise, the only guy worse is J.J. McCarthy. This is all about small sample sizes because we've all watched enough film to know that Daniel Jones is not going to finish the year as the best quarterback in the league, and we know that Cam Ward isn't going to be bad forever. He just has a tragic football team all around him, and the only other quarterback on the Titans' active roster is Brandon Allen, who's played 18 games in 9 seasons. Everyone's very likely to be safe for a few more weeks, no matter where your team is at, except from the injury bug. Keep an eye out for that. And that's a wrap. Check out all my socials, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, at The Voice of Tanner, X, just Voice of Tanner. YouTube, again, is the whole thing spelled out with spaces, The Voice of Tanner. I want to continue to highlight the YouTube channel, in fact. That one's never gotten a ton of traction, and I do have a lot of content on there across everything I've ever covered. Nearing 200 videos, plus this show is populated weekly there by an RSS feed. All around, I have some kind of content going out on some platform somewhere pretty much every single day right now, so stay up to date. Catch you next week. This has been Season 2, Episode 28 of White Noise Sports with Tanner White. Thanks for joining me.
He's gonna have to fight! Bang! Pressure's coming! Dumped! Hogtied! When you've given everything, what will the record books say about you, Matt?